There's just something about 8mm that is just absolutely beautiful. And these Portuguese Mausers are absolutely beautiful, but I just like shooting them. I don't know anything about them. So Matt, how about you do this video?
Hey everybody, welcome back to Classic Firearms. I'm Matt, and we're going to talk about some Portuguese Mausers today. Now, you guys and me, we've gone through some walks through history, talking about the development of certain kind of firearms and how they came to be. And I thought maybe an interesting, different take on that is talking about weird offshoots or developments that are a little bit different from kind of the main path of the development these things took. So in this case, the Portuguese Mauser, which is an interesting kind of variation of a Gewehr 98. And we're going to talk about exactly what makes it a little bit different and why it doesn't follow the kind of traditional path of development you see other Mausers take through history. Now, Portugal at this time, and we're talking about the very beginning of the 19th century, they were using a Kropatschek rifle, which is very much like the French Lebel. It was a very early design. In fact, it was designed as a black powder rifle, and then they found that the action was strong enough to kind of start developing smokeless powder loads for it. But by 1904, they're looking to replace this rifle, and a military officer in the Portuguese army, whose name was Jose Alberto Vergaro, he decided he was going to design a rifle, and it would be then produced under contract in Germany by DWM. And so that is what we have kind of on the table today. So this was entitled the Espingarda, which basically just means rifle, model, 6.5mm model of 1904. Now, quick caveat, do not confuse that rifle with the model of 1904 rifle produced by DWM for kind of export to other countries like China and stuff, because that is a much more traditional just copy of a Gewehr 98. So the Espingarda 6.5mm model of 1904 is a very different animal. So like the name kind of suggests, it was in a 6.5 by 58mm cartridge. And, you know, they developed this as a very kind of modern at the time version of a Gewehr 98. So it has most of the features that we would associate with Mauser rifles of the time, but kind of some interesting throwbacks as well. So if we pick up this rifle, the first thing you're going to notice is on the end of the receiver here. So we notice that the bolt handle is actually in front of this rear receiver bridge. And then also it's got a split receiver bridge. Now, if you look at most Mauser rifles, you'll know that this is usually a solid bridge across the back and that the bolt handle is actually behind it. And so you might wonder kind of where this part of the design came from if it's supposed to be developed from the Gewehr 98. So this is actually kind of going back to a little bit earlier, the Gewehr 88, or even the Mannlicher Schonauer rifle, where the bolt handle actually acts as a third locking lug. So on the bolt, you have two locking lugs up here for the action, and then this bolt handle is actually kind of acting like a third locking lug to help increase the strength of the action. So that's definitely a very unique aspect of this. Also, you know, when you just look at this rifle, you know, I would say it very much resembles kind of some of the other offshoot Mausers, like a Yugoslavian M48, with the way that the upper handguard looks. But, you know, other than that, I mean, again, it shares a lot of features in common with Mausers of all types. So this was, again, produced from 1904 to about 1960, and Portugal produced overall about 100,000 of these rifles for their own use. There was a small number, about 5,000, that were developed and sent to Brazil for their federal police department in 1906, and those were actually chambered in 7 by 57 or 7mm Mauser. And then South Africa actually also purchased a significant number, about 20,000, in 1915 to supplement the fact that they did not have enough of their standard issue Enfield rifles. So we've seen this rifle actually in, you know, a couple different places, and in fact, the last place that this kind of sees service in world history is in Africa, where it still pops up from time to time in conflicts. It's kind of like if you watch footage of the Ukrainian conflict and you see someone popping out like a PPS 43 or something, and you're like, wow, that's a throwback. So we still see these things sometimes pop up, but officially retired from military service with Portugal in about 1960. So, you know, the original development of these guns was very interesting. It was a long rifle, which was very common for the time. So it was about a 29-inch barrel. And then they went through like a retrofitting process. in 1939 because at that point, Portugal had actually adopted the K98K as a standard issue rifle. And so they went through a process to make these rifles as close as possible to the K98K, which makes sense, right? Ease of training, ease of use. It just makes sense that the rifles would want to be as similar as possible. We see that in other times, like the Swiss rifles that are adopted, so like the 9611 rifles, where they try to adopt rifles to be as close as possible to the current one without wasting the rifles that are already in service. So the two main things that they did here were that they shortened the barrel, so it went from about 29 inches to 24 inches, which pretty closely matches the K98K. They also re-chambered them for 8mm Mauser, or 8x57. So the rifles we have here are 8x57. Now, one thing that is interesting is that there didn't seem to be a standard practice of remarking the rifles. So even though the name, the model got an updated name, so instead of the Espingarza 6.5mm model of 1904, it's now the Espingarza 8mm model of 1904/39. They didn't really seem to have a standard practice of remarking the receivers. So these receivers have the original markings that just state 6.5mm, as well as model of 1904. Now, on some rifles, you may find that the 6.5 has been stamped over with some X's in order to kind of make sure that the user's aware that it's no longer in the 6.5 caliber. But it seems to have been just an individual effort on the behalf of some Portuguese armorers. It was not standard issue because most of the rifles that we have seen don't have those stamps to mark out the caliber. So it's important for anybody who picks one of these up to definitely make sure to check the caliber. Almost all of them are going to be converted to 8mm, but I mean, I would just make sure to check if you get one of these rifles or you encounter one, that you definitely confirm the caliber of the rifle prior to trying to shoot it, due to the fact the markings aren't going to match. There were also a couple smaller changes that were made with the caliber conversion and the adoption of that, 1904-39 model. First off, they added this front sight protector. Now, what's really cool about this is that you still retain windage adjustability on the front sight. So you have a screw here that maintains the front sight kind of wings on here, and that slides off to the front. So on the rear, there is no kind of solid piece for that protector that completely encapsulates it. So if you remove that screw, you could take this off the front, adjust windage. Now, we would expect that that's probably something that would have been done by like a military armorer, getting it sighted in. They would have installed that front sight protector. And then the expectation is that the soldier is not going to mess with that in the field. But again, it does mean that if you find that you need to, you can adjust the windage there. And secondly, due to the caliber change, they also had to grind down the rear sight base. You can see that this does have kind of a traditional sliding rear sight. It's marked from like 200 to 2,000 meters, but they had to grind that down slightly so that it would be accurate for the new caliber. Now, the rifles we've come across also come with a sling. It's got this cleaning kit, which is a really cool cleaning kit. So on one side, you have just an empty space where you could possibly put some patching or something. And then on the other side, it's got all of the accoutrements, like a kind of a bore snake and brushes and things all shoved in here. And then also bayonets. So this should take basically any kind of typical Gewehr 98 bayonet. And it's one of those things where, is a bayonet like a mandatory thing for a rifle nowadays? No, but it's really cool to be able to have that really historical look of mounting a bayonet on your rifle. And what's really cool, the rifles we're seeing have come with bayonets. Now, like many surplus firearms, you can definitely expect that there may be times in which there are replacement parts. So not all of the rifles are going to be completely matching serial number wise. The bayonets very well may not match the rifles. But it's cool that there are these really historic firearms and that they're not your typical Mauser. So just to give a comparison to a more typical Mauser, I have this German K98K here. And so we can kind of see some of those features that we were talking about, where the bolt handle here is to the rear, and this is a completely solid rear receiver bridge, which is why we're able to mount a scope here. We can also kind of just compare the overall lengths of these rifles. So if we put the butt stocks together, we can see that it's maybe just slightly longer. And again, just one of those things that the military would have done to try to give the same feeling of handling both of these rifles to both the older Espingarza and the newer K98Ks that they were adopting at that time in 1938. Again, because they are surplus and of a certain age, another thing you can expect with the condition of these is that there may be some minor cracks in stocks. Depending on where those are, that could affect the shootability of the rifle or not. Again, the rifles I have seen, they have some minor cracks that shouldn't affect shootability, but always make sure to have, any kind of surplus that you come across checked out and make sure that it's safe to fire, because, obviously with a rifle past a certain age, you want to make sure that you're not putting yourself in risk. But, these I just think are really cool, again, in that they're not your traditional Mausers. Everybody in the world just about has made a variation of the Mauser, from the US, South America, even Asia. And they're a phenomenal rifle. And I think that everyone out there should probably have some variation of Mauser in their collection. But these just are kind of an interesting little side evolution where, I didn't really develop into anything else. Obviously, Portugal did go and just adopt the K98K as the most, kind of modern rifle at the time. But certainly there's a historical value and interest there in the decisions that were made with the design, using that older style Mannlicher Schonauer kind of bolt assembly. And yeah, I mean, when you think about the history of use, these have been used in World War I in the long configuration. Now, officially Portugal was neutral in World War II. There were some minor conflicts in which they were involved, but interesting enough, it's unlikely that they actually used any of the 0439 models in combat during World War II, because the soldiers in East Timor, when they were invading in the Pacific kind of theater, they still had the older Kropatschek rifles issued to them there. And then there was some engagement with Allied forces where they were assisting English forces, but they were actually issued British weapons so that there would have been ease of logistics during that conflict. So, but still, there's the chance that this rifle, in its pre-shortened configuration, could have been used in World War I. So yeah, guys, again, I think that this would be kind of an interesting new take on some of our history videos, dead ends or strange variants. Let me know what you think. And again, always love to do these kind of history-based content. So let me know what kind of topics you'd like to see, whether it be kind of the older ones we've done with the development of a certain type of firearm line, or some of these new variants and offshoots.